So we have some really great technology. We're selectively killing cancer cells, glioblastoma cells in mice using resonant ultrasound frequencies at diagnostic doses. Diagnostic doses shown safe on humans for 100 years on 10 billion people, including pregnant women and their fetuses for the last 50 years in rich countries. But we're selectively killing cancer cells. Wait, what? How is that a therapeutic with diagnostic? Well, the answer is as simple as an opera singer can ping a wine glass, match that frequency of sound at safe sound levels, and destroy the wine glass and harm nothing else in the room. Cancer cells have a resonant frequency that's different than other cells because A, they're really fast dividing. They're kind of rickety ships. You can shake them apart. And they also have really huge nucleuses and small cytoplasms, which means they have a different resonant frequency. The pessimist in me thinks they seem to be designed to jack the price up 10x, like we saw with epinephrine for kids that got peanut allergies or bee sting allergies. They jacked up from it's $1 of drug in it, and they were selling it for $1,400 a few years ago. And parents couldn't afford it, and kids are dying of bee stings that didn't need to with known allergies. Like this is like business as usual in healthcare, but open source, my gosh, you could change some of that. And how do you make money? Hmm. A single rare disease, 5,000 people have it, $1 billion development, charge $1 million a piece. Hmm. What about millions of people with lots of diseases and you make $100 a piece? It's a lot more revenue and it's a lot faster.
Hello, Dr. Jepsen. You are the founder and CEO of Openwater, a company pioneering the use of infrared light and ultrasound to treat the world's most devastating diseases. So, welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Jepsen, I think with Openwater, you have potential to kind of almost bring a paradigm shift to the way that interventions are developed and diseases are treated, because the current method takes a long time and it's very expensive. And the way you're doing it seems so much more efficient and effective. Could you talk about what is your approach to developing interventions?
Sure. The big problem is the moats are very large. When you have the Wall Street Journal, as they did a week ago, say, and a headline in the front page, are we justified in murdering healthcare CEOs? The answer is obviously no, but we have to fix the system. It's a 20 to 40-year moat. It gets more expensive, not cheaper, and still lots of people die. We have World War II levels of death every year globally. 55 million people die. How do we use the tools of our time, not just AI, not just pharma, but also Moore's Law, to make better, faster, and cheaper a reality? So I started Openwater close to 9 years ago to do that and have focused every waking hour on that. I am we all, whether we're healthy our whole lives, we know people that have been sick. We know people that maybe could have had a different opportunity if we could just move faster and make it cost like what we do in consumer electronics is have the price and this double the speed every 2 years. How can we do that in healthcare? So that's what I've been exploring with this Openwater for a while. And it's using the fact that infrared light, low intensity ultrasound, and low intensity electromagnetics penetrate our body and modulating the phase of the waves in light and sound using Moore's Law's improvement in chip factories. I'm a chip designer, analog chip designer for now decades, with lots of multi-billion dollar, well, several multi-billion dollar products under my belt, bunch of startups, whatever, MIT professor, PhD in physics, using that to see what we can do. So we have some really great technology. We're selectively killing cancer cells, glioblastoma cells in mice using resonant ultrasound frequencies at diagnostic doses. Diagnostic doses shown safe on humans for 100 years on 10 billion people, including pregnant women and their fetuses for the last 50 years in rich countries. but we're selectively killing cancer cells. Wait, what? How is that a therapeutic with diagnostic? Well, the answer is as simple as an opera singer can ping a wine glass, match that frequency of sound at safe sound levels, and destroy the wine glass and harm nothing else in the room. Cancer cells have a resonant frequency that's different than other cells because A, they're really fast dividing. They're kind of rickety ships. You can shake them apart. And they also have really huge nucleuses and small cytoplasms, which means they have a different resonant frequency. So do neurons, so do stem cells, so do senescent cells, so does COVID. Lots of different things. So is, as we're finding and are about to publish, amyloid microclots, which are the hallmark of aging, of neurodegenerative disease, of type 2 diabetes, and of long COVID. So the implications of what we're doing are pretty profound for lots of diseases. So, okay, you got some cool technology. There's lots of cool technology in healthcare. We think this will change the world, but like, whoa, we show these great results, and people are like, yeah, when are you shipping? When do you get regulatory approval? And you look at that. You look at the studies that exist of what it costs and what it takes. There was a comprehensive one published about 2 years ago of every single complex therapeutic medical device that got approved by the FDA in the last 30 years. The capitalized cost in 2024 dollars for that is $658 million and 13 years of development. So in 5% interest rates, how do you fund that? And shouldn't we spend all our money on AI and build big data centers? That's what's got the money because like they're kind of getting stuff done, but they're not getting regulatory approvals. They're not getting that through. How do you get it through faster? So I pondered this as a startup CEO in need of funding. I've raised $100 million, by the way. I got $50 million non-dilutive from crypto founder of Great Note, Vitalik Buterin, to run this experiment we came up with. It was Vitalik's idea. Vitalik Buterin founded Ethereum and is the best known person, arguably, in crypto because the guy that founded Bitcoin disappeared like 10 years ago. His name's Satoshi and has left these wallets. Nobody's very mysterious. Anyway, Vitalik is very upfront and open and really supports open source and decentralized things and trying to get things done. So if you open source, what does that give you? Isn't that like charity? Open source is not a synonym for charity. We're a for-profit business model, but by open sourcing, you can get the same platform that could be useful. There's pretty strong evidence this could be useful not just for glioblastoma, but all cancers, not just mental disease, where we have results where close to half of our patients went into remission of severe depression as we turned off their overfiring neurons, non-invasively, no hole in the skull, with a diagnostic level of ultrasound. But that could be useful for all mental diseases, all addictions, all neurodegenerative disease, even pain, like turning on and off neurons, turning on and off stem cells, rejuvenating senescent cells. So, how does a single company do that? We decided to make the platform. I'm pretty good. I've got a long history in innovative consumer electronics that ship at scale. Let's ship a platform. Let's kind of make it like Android and let the apps on it be regulatory approvals and give them more data than they've ever had before. People complain about the FDA. They do. I could do that too. That won't get me anywhere. What will get us somewhere is giving the FDA more data so they can make better decisions. So what if we could give them 100, 1,000 times more data than they've ever had? And not just the US FDA, all the FDAs and all the other acronyms that are called in the 200 some odd countries in the world that do regulatory approvals to make sure that the citizens of those countries have safe and effective treatments because that's a good thing. And getting 100 times more data for a doctor and a patient to make a decision, that's great. And getting the innovation models out from 20 to 40-year moats. There's nothing innovative in healthcare when it's a 40-year moat of making sure you can make your money back because it took so long. And a drug takes about 26 years on average and close to $3 billion just to get regulatory approval. So the problem is that long timeline. They literally call it the opposite of Moore's law. That's the stuff I do in silicon, better, faster, cheaper, fast, the semiconductor software revolution that we've all lived in. They call it E-Room's law, which is Moore's law spelled backwards because it's exponentially more expensive and more time consuming. So like, let's throw Moore's law at it. Seems obvious. I know it sounds like we're standing on a high horse, but we have some pretty compelling results. We put everything on GitHub. Everything's like real open source called AGPL and Creative Commons 4.0 share alike. All 68 of our patents free to use for anybody, except for one reason: you can't use them to sue us or our customers. But other than that, go wild. And yeah, so that is this experiment, if you will. But to call it an experiment isn't quite fair. There's a million papers published on using infrared light, ultrasound, and electromagnetics to treat hundreds of diseases over the last 20 years alone. But it's a rounding error to zero to say how much has gotten into the healthcare system. And that's because of the 13 years and $658 million. And we can change that if we rethink the business model and give everybody what they want: better, faster, cheaper. So we're making devices right now. I've got them right here. They'll be $10,000. This was a whole cart a year ago, and it was a whole room like 5 years ago, and millions of dollars. And in this, we've got these transducers. I can even take it apart. That that allow us to focus ultrasound wherever we wish to in the body. And this is a 2-pack, but we've got 1-pack, 6 packs, 6 packs, and you can 3D print kind of anything you want. You need to get the regulatory approval for it. We also have things like this that see blood flow 20 times better than a multi-million-dollar MRI machine, CT scanner, anything that we can find published. And it's using $1 camera chips in your smartphone and a laser that was, I've got it over there, I can get it for you, that's about the size of my fingernail and was the size of a room and over $1 million a few years ago. And that laser enables us to see the waves and the wavelength of light. So we take the lenses off this camera chip, and the camera chips are so cheap because the silicon area is small. And so the pixel sizes are the size of the wavelength of light. So we're doing something new where I actually made my first holograms when I was a high school kid, fell in love with them. We're making holograms on the camera chips that show us blood flow because we pulse this laser, and then we can see micro motions in the body. We can see tremors. We can see probably kidney flow, lymph node flow, fetal blood flow, etc., with something that's got 8 $1 camera chips in it and a new kind of laser that we're putting into production right now. We've been testing this at University of Pennsylvania and Brown University for a couple of years on the number 2 killer in the world, which is stroke, large vessel occlusion stroke. That's a blood flow issue. Literally, if you have that stroke, there's a treatment, but only 5% of the hospitals in the US can do that treatment. And so you have a 5% chance of getting to the right hospital to do the treatment, unless you could do the diagnosis in the ambulance or at the earlier point. And often that's not done. And that's why 6.5 million people die of large vessel occlusion stroke globally each year. It is literally a time to diagnose this issue. You can snake a catheter up your carotid artery, pull the clot out if you can get there to them in time. The large vessel occlusion is worse because it blocks all the blood flow downstream. So if you're with that clots in there for 2 hours, it could be a whole third of your hemisphere that's dead. So if you live, you may not walk again or talk again. You certainly won't have a job again. You may not go home again if you live. It's the most expensive long-term healthcare as well.
Just a thought. Could you combine the ultrasound with the blood flow monitor to
Of
identify where the block is and break it up?
Right. So we're working on that, but we started. So there's some worry that we'd like to do that. Yes,
Right.
of course, or at least loosen it.
Mm.
But if it's a big clot and it's in a large vessel and you break it up, what if half goes to one smaller vessel and half to the other? So we're working on the amyloid microclots that are really helpful for neurodegenerative disease, long COVID, aging, and type 2 diabetes, because those are right now about 8 microns in diameter, 8 to 80, let's say. In our early results we're about to publish, we bring them down to 4 microns in diameter. It sounds like half. It's actually about 8 times smaller because of X, Y, Z cubed, but whatever. The main reason we mention their diameter is because the diameter of a capillary is 5 to 10 microns. So it's the difference between something getting through a capillary or not. And if there's a big clog at the capillary, the theory is things die around it because they get no blood flow. So, small vessel disease, that's why people, diabetics, the feet, the legs, the long COVID, we're still learning more about long COVID, but it seems to be an inflammation. If you take COVID, drop it in a vial of blood, you get these microclots. We see them in Alzheimer's, we see them in aging. And with a therapeutic level, what's been called a therapeutic level, excuse me, what's been called a diagnostic level of ultrasound, we're achieving a therapeutic result by using the old opera singer trick, the resonance frequency. So we go through lots of octaves and lots of rhythms to find the right frequency to affect certain cells and not harm other cells. And we can focus that ultrasound anywhere we wish to in the body by using these arrays that allow us to pinpoint different locations, unlike a drug where that goes through your whole body. And that's very important for, say, complications of drugs that affect your gut differently than the, intended area of activity.
Right. A lot to kind of go back in there and,
Yes,
and unpack. So you have got two devices, and I saw that you were looking at three different indications, and you kind of talked about those. So I was stroke diagnostics, the brain cancer, the glioblastoma, and mental issues with kind of depression. So could you talk a little bit
Kind of
about?
all cancers and all mental disease and all neurodegenerative disease and all cardiovascular disease. And I know that sounds insane, but it's not if you look at the spending. This vertical integration to a single rare disease, to glioblastoma, whatever, 5,000 people in this country have glioblastoma. How many of them have health insurance? How many can you help? You spend $1 billion to get there. What do you charge per patient? The answer, somewhere with 6 zeros, million. Does that really help anything? Because so you have to think of something if you think in consumer electronics. I help bring and put birth lots of laptops, cell phones, VR, AR sets, lots of cool screen technology like the ones I'm looking at on you. For that, we have to figure out how to do volume. We have to make a general purpose platform that has implications for many people. And what we have when we can affect certain cells and not other cells, or see blood flow or any movement to this accuracy, is a new kinds of ways to treat and monitor the body that can be useful for all of biology and also, all animals, veterinary. We have people trying them on plants, whatever. Don't tell the vegetarians. Plants can feel and things like that. So, but yeah, so it's more, there's more broad implications. We should be in 100 clinical trials next year across 100 diseases and probably grow to 1,000 the year after by making a platform that can be really low cost, that's open source, that's reconfigurable. What could happen if you could do a clinical trial and not have to by hand make all the stuff and hire a bunch of software engineers or get them from postdocs from the computer science department, the electrical engineering department to make, and the mechanical engineering department to make all your prototypes. What could you do if you could leverage that open source community and the sharing of safety data to move faster, and efficacy data, any efficacy data that they have, and patient lists and all of this? What could happen? It might sound utopian.
No, it
Open
absolutely.
source is taking over technology. I mean, look
Yeah.
at Apple, they're based on Linux. Look at Android, that's Google. Look at AWS, that's open source, that's Amazon. Look at IBM, it's carried by Red Hat's profits. It's if you can look at how something works and leverage some existing prototype, You know what happens? You can go faster and make more innovation faster. And that's what we've done in technology. It went from crazy idea back in the 70s to 50, it took 50 years,
Mhm.
but can we leverage that in healthcare? Because most people in healthcare think, I don't get it. I'm like, okay, keep with your big iron thing. MRI saved
Mhm.
my life in 1995. I had a brain tumor, not the bad kind, like glioblastoma, but the good kind. But I was headed for death. That same MRI machine, size and cost, the same. The only difference is hospitals now make 90% gross margin on it. It's their biggest profit margin. So the price is 10x more expensive, plus inflation, even adjusted dollars to get one than when it saved my life 30 years ago. That's healthcare. So
Mhm.
it's almost too easy if you try to apply these things. I just don't understand why nobody has before that I can find. And if somebody on your show does, we'd like to collaborate with them and work with them and so forth. So I say that sort of, rhetorically, like, tell me I'm wrong. That'd be great, and etc.
So, so you have so my understanding is you have two kind of platforms. One is an infrared and one is ultrasound, right?
For
And
now, yeah.
for
And
now,
you
right?
can combine them together. And obviously you can add in things like, ultrasound scanning to see if you've got a cancer and you're treating yourself at home, for example, which we envision, like what, do you really have to go to the hospital every day? That makes it hard. Um, you care about three questions. Is it getting bigger? Is it getting smaller? Is it staying the same size? It'd be
Right,
really good if the answer was yes to question two, right?
right.
Like, and to be able to see that or see that it wasn't and change up the therapy.
How much work is it for somebody to take one of your items, one of your products, and turn it into a end solution? You said that you scan different frequencies, looking for the right frequency to be able to kill a particular cell, maybe,
Right.
right? I mean, does your machine, does your software do that, or they have to write the piece that does that? And how much work, if somebody took one, how much
Right.
time would you expect them to require to get to market?
Depends what they're, oh, to get to market. Okay. If
Well,
they're looking for,
all right, to develop, to get to market is there's too many
well,
unknowns.
let's take it in pieces, right?
Okay.
So one piece is, do they need to find the right frequencies? In some cases, we know, some cases we want to check. Then you need to do whatever, a phase one and then a phase two trial. How many people do you need? It depends on the disease. If you're going to say to a regulatory agency, I've cured depression, or just move people into remission. Cure is
Mm,
hard. Move people into
mm,
remission for a year. You're going to need at least a year on three trials and probably 10,000 people. The average cost of a person right now for a trial, so totally sunk cost, is 40 to $70,000. Just do the math. That's a lot.
mm,
Unless you can pool more mental diseases together on more humans and show safety on humans. For all neurons, we use about 400 kilohertz at the same duty cycle. So if you can amass that over trials in parallel, like 1,000 clinical trials in parallel, everybody throws in 100,
mm,
you could have an approval in a year.
right.
You want to do no harm, you want to show efficacy, maybe two. That's huge. If you look at some smaller therapeutic ultrasound and the number of patients that got approval, it can be on average right now about 75 patients, but with the shared safety data, that should go down to 50. And if you share across multiple cancers that are similar in nature, brain cancers, pancreatic
Mm,
cancer, liver cancer, colon cancer, bladder cancer, breast cancer, etc., it gets really inexpensive. You take, because you also are looking at capitalized costs. If it takes you 5, 7 years to do this trial, think about that. I think about the 8% interest of the capitalized cost that you're compiling each year, compounding rather.
mm,
So there's that. So huge savings by going in parallel. On finding the frequency, we know it for some things, but other things, if you get a biopsy, what you can take is this invention called organoids. We use brain organoids. There's different organoids. They're like, we have these thousands of little brains, about a half a millimeter across. We got 16 different lines of glioblastoma from City of Hope in LA. And we grew up little brain tumors. And we went through sound frequency sweeps on these little organoids and we picked the top three. And then we just, well, we want to say, well, let's see if how they work in mice. And so we saw how they work in mice, and all of the frequencies we found worked very well in mice, shrinking their tumor to nothing with a single 2-minute diagnostic level of ultrasound at 150 kilohertz, which is the frequency of a fish finder. It's in production for decades, but at a diagnostic level. And so that's what you can do if you want to say, well, what if my tumor is different? We're actually looking at providing a service to grow the organoids and send them through frequency sweeps. So people with a cancer can take a biopsy and grow it. So we're looking at doing that with a company that runs organoids every 6 weeks, and they just throw our rig in and turn it on and pay for a person to do it. We haven't hit go on that yet. It seems like a service we can provide, or maybe someone else can do it. That would be great too. But it's strange when you look at the 15,000 papers published in the last 20 years on therapeutic ultrasound. I've scraped the web for most of them and looked at the frequencies used, and in about 92% that I could scrape, it was one, because they're not looking at the harmonics. They think just blast the crap out, but like the frequency matters. Turns out the frequency matters, like the opera singer in the wine glass and the weakness of the pill. The frequency matters for suppressing the neurons. That's about 400 kilohertz. Seems to work very well. We're seeing if we can fine tune it, but the papers often don't have the hardware. That's the problem. It's the old joke is, where do you find your car keys when you lose them? You look under the street light because that's the only place you can see. Well, with the stuff you can buy. So it's not that hard. I mean, it was actually hard to make a transducer, a wearable transducer that allows us to do different frequencies at different times over many octaves and many rhythms. That also allows us to focus this sound anywhere we wish to, even through skull. And we do that by registering what data, be it from ultrasound or MRI. We take a camera and roll it around the head, take lots of pictures of it, develop a mesh, register your bone structure on the bone structure of your CRT, of your MRI. So you register the bone structure of a bunch of cameras, pictures from your smartphone, Android smartphone. That's what we can do it with, it's open source. Um, with your MRI, and you're wearing the headset then, so we know exactly where the ultrasound is, so we can assure we hit exactly the spot that you want to, and we can do that in the body as well. That was just a little throw in that gets rid of yet another $300,000 piece of equipment in the hospital. Like literally, if you ever walk around hospitals, look at everything you see. Everything's like at least $10,000 because consumer electronics never hit that land, but we can make it hit that land. And this is like, well, what's the quality then if you're doing it in consumer electronics? Like FDA, US FDA says a unit of 10, a 10 unit build, excuse me, is a quality build. I was literally a CTO of a division at Intel 20 years ago. Our minimum sample size, 10,000 units. There's nothing quality about a 10 unit build. It's somebody in a batch hand soldering the thing, and with a screwdriver and that maybe measures the torque and so forth. And so really you can use consumer electronics at the scale that we've created for laptops and smartphones and the rest of it to transform healthcare and create a handheld hospital. It doesn't have drug shortages, which seem to be the pessimist in me thinks there seem to be designed to jack the price up 10x, like we saw with epinephrine for kids that got peanut allergies or bee sting allergies. It jacked up from it's $1 of drug in it, and they were selling it for $1,400 a few years ago. And parents couldn't afford it, and kids are dying of bee stings that didn't need to with known allergies. Like this is like business as usual in healthcare. But open source, my gosh, you could change some of that. And how do you make money? A single rare disease, 5,000 people have it, $1 billion development, charge $1 million a piece. Hmm. Well, what about millions of people with lots of diseases and you make $100 a piece? It's a lot more revenue and it's a lot faster. It seems a no-brainer to me as I've run the models. Every way I ran the model to do open source, it was a 10 to 100x revenue and an even bigger profit. So like it's just we should speed it up because people are dying. Like people are literally dying waiting for these products. And it's like do another study with the FDA and spend another $50 million. And they're well-meaning, but let's collect the data in parallel. And that's I think the solution. That's the road that we're on. And that's why I'm talking to you because we want everybody in. Everybody who wants to come in, you can be in. You can go to our website, you can download our Gerber files and everything and do it yourself, or you can buy the stuff that we have or whatever. There's space for everybody. There is so much to be done. There's everybody's in if they want to be. If you want to wait a
Yes.
while, see more data, you can do that too. It's fine.
So a couple of questions. Uh, but you will make your money through the people can buy the devices from you and from like services. Is that right?
Sure, that's how open source. So by making 10x more of something, it's only a slight exaggeration to say it's 10x cheaper. And so by making these builds of things, we lower the cost a lot. We enjoy a portion of that as profit. But if, it keeps us honest, will people compete? Sure. Like you can buy your own Arduino board or you can make your own. I'm a weirdo. I make my own sometimes, but a lot of people just buy the Raspberry Pi or buy the Arduino board. Like we're sort of like that. Although different people will take what we have and make it their own. And we also see all this talent, these million papers, all of these professors, all of these grad students doing really innovative things. Maybe they can get on the line. If you think of the modern smartphone, there's a dozen radio chips in there. There's four different camera chips. There's room for other people's innovations to create a more or just we can help if it's a
Mm.
separate mod, whatever, or they can do it themselves. It's all good. Um, People make money in smartphones, like and that's like I don't know, Apple's on their 16th, 17th, I can't remember the number, like time for something new when you get to generation, like literally. It seems we still think of the iPhone as new, but it really was 2007 and you
Yes.
know,
So,
we're coming on 20 years soon. It's time for something new. Why not? What's the version of that can address this Wall
mm,
Street Journal headline from last week? Are we justified in murdering healthcare CEOs? The answer is, of course not.
mm,
But it's 25% of the US economy. It's a big portion of other countries' economies too. We can't keep doubling. We can double once more. It's existential. We're literally spending education gets nothing then, it's all healthcare. We need to change the paradigm and we should probably use the tools of our time, which AI is great. And we use AI. Let's get more data and get AI, but let's also actually physically remove the cancer cells without, and as much as AI does,
yeah,
we'll learn a lot. Could we learn more about biology and treat things for cheaper? Like the future of the hospital is there is no hospital. Like
yeah,
the main reason you have hospitals is for surgery and for radiology. If you've got that in a handheld, you still need urgent care. You still need nursing until the robot's going to, you probably still need nursing anyway, but the major expense in our healthcare system of that 25%, fully half of it is hospital and doctor expenses. Clearly, the AI docs are coming. By the way, all those AMA members, the world needs more doctors. It's the AI with the human in the loop is more powerful. So, and there's a whole like billions of people, not just in the country, and there's solutions there. And I'm sure that those will be slow, unfortunately. But ours can be fast because people are dying of cancer. They want healthcare, right? You will pay anything. I mean, literally, I have billionaires coming to me and some of the poorest countries on earth coming to me at the same time to sort of own their regulatory approval, have their data, wanting a solution fast. A whole range of people. A lot of neuromodulation startups are buying this, a lot of cancer startups. Some of the most famous professors at some of the most famous institutes are getting them. So there's a range of people starting with these this coming year. The first units are in final testing right now. And so they're
Are there
coming.
any specific partners you can actually talk about, or is it's all kind of commercial at the moment?
Well, I don't have permission to say their names, but
Right. Yeah.
what is emerging is people are coming to us because they want to be in the trials. And so one thing that we will try to do is get permission to identify the customers trying to source patients for the trials so we can, or if they can't, like whatever, we can pull over. We don't want to compete with them, but like there's just a lot of people that want to try things and want to try things in a trial. There's other people doing biohacking with it, which is legal in some circumstances. The 2005 Nobel laureate in medicine biohacked himself to show ulcers weren't caused by spicy food. H. pylori, he took it, proved it. People thought he was nuts, and then he got the Nobel. So whatever, different to replace those 12 chemicals that I used to make in dosages that make me me. So like whatever, people need to do it, but we follow the laws of
Yeah.
whatever region. So
Of of course. So actually, I did have that question. So have you talked to the FDA no,
sure.
about so you were saying, you'll be able to pull the safety data, pull the end result data. Um, so if you discuss that with the FDA, are they on board? How much pooling can you do? Is that clear?
We've made all of our correspondence with the FDA public, which we know of no one else that has, but we did not need their permission to open source our device. It is not under their jurisdiction. We did check if it's under anybody's jurisdiction. We've got Gunderson Detmer, fabulous lawyers here in the Bay Area. So we do what's legal, but we don't need their permission for that. We are selling devices. If we called them medical devices, we would need their permission. We are selling R&D devices that are not FDA approved for R&D use only.
Right. I was thinking more. So I'm a partner. I buy your device, and then I want to get FDA approval.
Right.
And one of the benefits is that I could so other people have used your device, and so I can borrow some of their safety data. Now, have
All of
you?
it. We're getting everybody to share the safety data on our platform, and that can be scarfed or scraped by other people too. Yes, the safety data will be available. The efficacy data, some companies, I hope they make it public, but they may wish to keep it
Hmm,
private. They only get
right.
to keep it private for 5 years. So you move the moat down to 5 years from, 20 to 40 years, depending upon the product, which seems like a good thing. And you can also, what we're looking at doing is creating a consortium where people could choose to share their efficacy data. Some people may wish to keep their secret stuff. That's fine. Some people might find a benefit in more data being a good thing. A lot of, talk to anybody in AI, they want more data too, right? To use all of the tools of our time most effectively. So, but we don't want to force that part. The safety data, everyone clearly benefits from because a regulator approving giving us a regulatory approval to use on humans for a therapy, for something that can give treat a cancer, a mental disease, long COVID, et cetera, needs to show it's safe and effective. And so the safety can go pan disease, and that's very helpful to show, well, maybe this frequency is really challenging on somebody. And so if you can together pool more of that rather than maybe you only need 75 patients, but if you can pool it with 1,000 patients with similar diseases, it just gives the regulator more information to assure to a much better degree the safety of what we're talking about, even though 10 million people, 100 years, this is not a new chemical compound that's never physically existed before that you're injecting and changes your DNA or something. It's not that. But we still want it to be safe, don't we? And so this is a low cost way to make sure, even though it's a proven safe doses, somebody dies of Tylenol every week, So like whatever, like let's get the data, fine. But let's get the data without it taking, another few years. Like let's do it faster and let's do it cheaper and let's just share that collectively. In terms of the efficacy data, we'd love people to share the efficacy data and any other data and their improvements to the system and so forth. So that's the goal. And for people to say, they can come and say, your device sucks, mine's better. And the truth is, maybe it is. Usually, we're pretty proud of our device. So they're like, really? Let's see what you got. But, from that, they could have something better. And great, let's put that forward and etc. Let's just go faster. And there's a huge benefit for just making great products, right? And making them in a time and capital efficient way. And that pervaded my whole life in consumer
Mhm.
electronics. From what I can tell, that is not part of healthcare. But there's a lot of well-meaning, the nurses are great, and so the doctors can be good. There's a lot of well-meaning people in that, but there's a lot of huge opportunity for improvement using like doctors they don't really know that much about physics or consumer electronics. They have to learn like biochemistry, all the DNA stuff, statistics. They literally kind of have to learn Latin too, right? And they do anatomy, and then they have to do because everything's in Latin, all the body parts, and they speak in anterior whatever, I guess that's one, but there's a lot of Latin in it. Anyway, they're not opposed to physics. They're really not opposed to physics. They just don't have a lot of time for it. It's physics is not woo-woo. What we're doing has real results so far in the clinic. A million papers on it in the last 20 years. We think we've moved things forward dramatically in the cost structure and in the physics. But there's a lot of smart people out there working on it. Could we make their work have more impact? It's important they get tenure. It's important to get the PhD. It's important to get the papers. But what really can have even more impact is saving the lives more quickly. So we're trying to get that done in collaboration with all that talent that exists working on the problem.
So the two devices that you have now are like the final version, or the first
Yeah. This
versions.
is called Open Motion. It's open
Hmm.
source. And the other one's called Open LIFU. Doesn't roll off to the tongue, but it's an acronym in the industry. It's called Low Intensity Focused Ultrasound. We also pulse it. Some people call it lipus, whatever. Anyway, it's the key thing. It's at a diagnostic level, but it's achieving therapeutic results, and it's known in the field. We push that forward, we think, in this reduction and get rid of the big $1 million carts. I mean, literally in this industry, you have to buy something. It's by a great company. It's called Verisonics. It's $250,000 in a year lead time when we were trying to get them. That's not great.
No.
We have that now in a little chip that size. Admittedly, they do high intensity and low intensity ultrasound with it, but we don't need all that high intensity. We're slow dose. So, like, why has nobody made that? It's just like this. We're good at consumer electronics. I've slept on the factory floors of the world for decades in order to ship really innovative products. And we're trying to leverage that to help here and be also humble about all of the work and all of the people trying to work so hard, trying to give them better tools than they've had before and hear feedback if that's not the case. Right now, we're hearing some great feedback, but there's nothing like shipping the product and getting feedback of opportunities for improvement. And I'm sure we have many. But right now, we've reduced $1 million system to $10,000, and that's headed to $1,000 once we can get to decent volumes of even, 50,000 units. So that I think changes everything if you can get something for the price of a smartphone for a therapy. That means the price of a therapy is the price of a phone call. And you don't have to go anywhere and sit in the waiting room and and it just the cost of like even an aspirin in the hospital if you get your bill is huge. So we can lower the cost. We can use the tools of our time, which everyone learned how to use Zoom. We're talking on Zoom. Cool. You can do like your therapy at home with your doctor on call. It's easier. You can hold a full-time job and have therapy every day. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, do you see this ever getting into well, I guess it would, into consumer electronics, because the way
Yeah.
that you're measuring blood seems to be much better than like my Aura ring. So it would give
Yeah.
me so much more
Totally consumer
detail.
it is consumer electronics, but in wellness applications, for
Right.
example, sure, it's just like when you can kill cancer cells and take people out of, you know, depression and
Mhm.
diagnose stroke, that seems a good first, but sure. And also brain computer interface. We literally are reading and writing neurons without the 1 inch hole in your skull. So we could go there. But most people working in BCI are going for, well, there's some wellness, like the meditation apps and can you make a better you and a you that you like and all of that is interesting as well. So there could be some wellness apps. The heart rate monitor was invented like 150 years ago.
Yeah.
We're just pushing on, but yeah, sure, it can be used for blood flow if you like. But also, if you look at what kills us, heart disease and cancers are
Yeah.
I think cardiovascular disease is number one, cancer is number two. Obviously, neurodegenerative disease, if you live long enough, has a big impact. And those are big areas as well that we think can get rapid approvals. But the wellness stuff is great too. That can help you avoid getting a severe mental disease if you can address it earlier, right?
Yes, I could certainly see. The thing is, you could see if you can modulate depression, then you could enhance people's thinking. You could make
Right.
them, and so
Right.
then there would be some ethical.
To focus on things. And yeah, and beyond that, yeah.
Yeah.
What is a thought? Neuroscientists say we don't know. Well, you know it when you see it, right? Like that, wasn't that the definition of pornography in the 70s? I know when I say some senator, I
Yeah.
can't remember who, but any rate, understanding how a neuron works versus being able to modulate thoughts are arguably two separate things, but on a continuum. We're certainly doing that with depression, with getting people out of the looping that happens in repetitive negative thought that you can see the hallmarks of on an fMRI. We don't actually see the neurons firing. We see an analogy for it because fMRI sees oxygen consumption, and where oxygen is being consumed in the brain, we believe correlates to where the neurons are firing. And so we know that we can reduce that and we can change the firing patterns with ultrasound. And we're able to focus the ultrasound wherever we wish to, even in multiple places at the same time. So yeah, that that's being enabled and it's open source. And we can also read the brain state. We can read it in optics, and there's some limitations with optical reading. The So we can read it with fMRI in some ways. You can read them with, Elon's implants and write them. That's an invasive procedure. There's some issue with how long they last. Maybe they'll get better, maybe they won't. We'll see. Um, I've had the 1 inch hole in my head. Hardest thing I've ever do. I don't see a billion people going anytime soon for the 1 inch hole in their head with the implants. Could they die and kill the material on the way down? But nonetheless, maybe that, in 100 years, maybe that becomes commonplace. Like the analogy is having this surgery for your ear or your eye. So there's a lot of approaches. In the case of optics right now, what we can see with absorption, this thing called, it's an acronym called FNIRS, is absorption or non-absorption. The color of blood changes whether it's carrying oxygen or not. So it's kind of a base thing. You put out two LEDs with different colors and you see where the oxygen is used. It's pretty inexpensive. A lot of people, 50 years old, technology, people have reduced it in size. We're actually seeing the motion, and that matters for a bunch of different diseases. We'll see how that matters, the blood flow change. Some people call it flow. They don't see flow, they see absorption. The actual flow. Like when we look at the images on our camera chips, they literally look like waves on the ocean because it's the interference of things. And we can read those waves like a sailor can read the waves on the ocean and know where the fish are, where the land is, and literally how much the blood is moving. Does that matter? Does it not matter? It probably does matter for a bunch of things. It matters in cancer, in the part of the tumor, it matters in a bunch of things. So, will we have non-invasive brain-computer interface, or will we have good brain-computer interfaces? The answer to me is absolutely yes. The question is when.
Yeah.
Pick a year. Is it 200 years from now? Do most people think it'll be 200 years from now? Probably. That's a long time. Like that was like a long time ago. 100 years ago? Could we do it in 50? When's it coming? How are we going to deal with it? The name of my company is called Openwater. It comes from an essay by the famous rock star Peter Gabriel, a human rights activist, who called me a lot when I was at Facebook trying to convince me to leave Facebook to do this because the implication, should we succeed, was that our thoughts would flow like water. And we needed to take swimming lessons to learn how to deal with that because our thoughts, sometimes we think things that we don't say that would be inappropriate to say in certain situations, in many situations. What happens when that's all transparent to everybody? What do we do? Is it honest? Are you bringing your authentic self to work? Do people really want that? No. So yeah, there's all these questions and they need to be discussed in the open. And so that's what, but the technology is moving forward. We can say we don't want to do it, don't want to approach this, don't care how the brain works. Not at all. We could say that, but I can't imagine that humanity is not interested in understanding how the brain works and how we can treat a lot of the diseases in the brain. And that inevitably will bring us to brain computer interface. That's sort of, I don't know. I'm old. Like I remember Dragon naturally speaking. Like sometimes I broke my hand and I had to use that to type, and it was really awful. And then all of a sudden it got really good. Remember? And speech to text got really good. That might happen here as we look at the breakthroughs of all these fields. Clearly, everybody knows about AI, but there's a lot of stuff happening. All that money Mark Zuckerberg spent on VR and AR, I've used that money, not any of it directly, but the manufacturing processes that have been put in place for next generation virtual reality and augmented reality, as well as LiDAR, have been absolutely critical for us to be able to execute on this without spending billions of dollars at all. So it's enabling us to be able to treat these diseases. But yes, some of the, but could we collaborate more? It's funny, when I first started talking about it, I had two friends. One used to run technology review, and he thought it was the end of love because you need something secret about yourself to really be in love. And then I was talking to this guy at Fox News, and he thought it would be the end of war because nobody would go to war if we could really understand each other. And I don't know if either are true. Probably not. But, people like to think about it. And I think we'll just need really good crypto on our thoughts and who we share what with. And teenagers will share everything. But,
Yeah.
they'll learn and grow up.
Yes. Yeah. I saw that you were talking to Peter Gabriel, which I thought was really cool.
He's has sweat equity in the company. He's also an investor as well and a
Right.
good friend. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you read science fiction like years ago? Larry Niven. Do you know who Larry Niven is?
My brother did Ringworld. Ringworld,
Yeah,
is that?
that he
Yeah,
wrote.
I never read those,
So
but
he had a device. He postulated a device called a drought, which directly stimulated your pleasure center in the brain, and it became like addictive. Like so, people just connected it, and then they just sat there
so,
and didn't eat or do anything.
okay, so I saw Sleeper with Woody Allen, and they had an orb, right?
Right,
Do you remember the orb? And that was the same thing, the pleasure. So yeah,
right,
probably will be done. And is it
yeah,
like Soma Holiday or from yet another? Was it Brave New World? I think
right. Yes,
dystopian
yeah, yeah.
future.
There's so yes, Brave New World. Yeah,
Um,
but that was a long time ago,
but
right?
but yeah, maybe what's addiction and what yeah. These are the questions. What will
It
people
is.
do with this?
It is.
Well, fine. I mean, it's the beauty of not being in a big company anymore, honestly, I could say.
That's true.
Honestly, people can see the truth anyway. Like, are people really not going to think of this? And shouldn't we
Yes.
talk about it, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I saw in the video that where you were talking with Peter Gabriel, one of them on YouTube, where
Wow.
by matching the brain patterns to someone who had just watched a video, you could tell what they were watching, right? So,
Yes.
so you're basically
That
reading their thoughts.
it's funny. I was still at Facebook then and talking to Peter Gabriel went on a trip at his kid's school, actually. He's a long-term friend of mine. I was sharing the work of somebody else for that. And the reason I mentioned it, Jack Gallant at University of California, Berkeley, was really got that. I saw that video in when it came out about 2012. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's time to really get in and help because in that case, he was using graduate students laying in an MRI machine and feeding them either YouTube videos or podcasts. And then, or, one of his grad students took it even further in Japan and had the grad students fall asleep in the MRI. And so looking at the patterns and taking brain maps from the MRI and then correlating with the images they watch to create a library of how their brain reacts to image or sounds or the way they describe their dreams to the point where they can then put the grad students some grad students got PhDs laying in MRI machines. Um, but it's really interesting. Then they'd show a new sequence or a new podcast, and the scan compared to the data that had been collected on that grad student could then create a grainy image of what the student was watching, what words they were thinking about, what words they were about to say, what they had dreamed of. I thought, whoa, this is 2012. And so I just thought that it was the most amazing work. And I thought, wow, somebody has to fix this MRI scanner, like make it smaller, cheaper, better, faster. I hadn't the neuroscientists sort of pushed pretty far for a long time, and really it just looked like they were getting somewhere, and so it continues. But it is fascinating to think of being able to communicate with thought alone and in reach in some number of years. And I'm not a futurist. I know you end up at these futurist conferences and all people say like it's going to be like they usually pick an odd number, 2093 or 20 whatever, I'm not in the Ray Kurzweil days, although I do read his stuff. Um, I think if I thought that it would be that year, I wouldn't work on it. So I just sort of ignore and see what we can do, but I should probably read
Yeah.
more of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, but there's some amazing people working in neuroscience, I guess, and in this whole field that aren't Elon Musk companies. And I think they get a lot of press as it is. It'd be great to feature all of the great work of so many different people that have pioneered the field and are doing really interesting work now that is different than that. But that's not the way the world works. So thanks for featuring it. And Jack Gallant would be a great guy you could have on. I could give you a whole list of them, but there's some really excellent work being done right now by so many different organizations.
If anyone's interested in working with you and getting their hands on one of these devices, where do they go and how do they start that?
Openwater.health is our website. They can go there and put in an order reservation. The next units from the build will be ready in Q2. The first ones are coming off the line, but we've had the orders for a while, so we first come, first served. The other place, if you've got questions, community at openwater.health, ask your questions. And we'll be developing things like if you want to get into a clinical trial with our customer, trying to source that and any other ideas you have. And we're also hiring kind of for everything. So we need everything.
Okay. So,
Or if you want to just take it and to make your own, you can go onto our GitHub and download the files and build your own. It's hard to build your own laser and ultrasound, but you can try and or we can, help, or it's probably cheaper to buy ours, but you might innovate in a different way that you want to do something. So we welcome and encourage that.
right. I would think it would be much cheaper to buy yours because then all the drivers will work and everything. I mean, like
$50 million
building,
has gone into this so far, so it is a lot cheaper. But if we did it again, we could do it more efficiently, but it would probably at least take half of that. But
right.
you can look and see if there's things that we can be helpful with. or, ideas that you have of things we should do, or maybe modules you think we should ship that you know something about in addition to it. We are kind of busy, so we need to hire people to help us doing that, but we can scale up and do that.
Okay, excellent. So, Dr. Jepsen, thank you so much. You've been very kind with your time, and it has been great
Thank you
talking
so
with you.
much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so delightful to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great talking with you, and your ideas are brilliant. So I really wish you luck with them.